Hey everyone! Today we are going to be talking about the other side of the Force-using coin known as the Sith. If you tuned in with us last time, you know that we covered the Jedi and their numerous wars pretty thoroughly. I won't be covering that here. What I will be covering is what a Sith is and where they came from. So sit back and relax and let the hate flow through you. So the first thing we ought to say is that the group known as the Sith is more accurately known as the Sith Order. Because goodness knows when I think of a group of people fueled entirely by hate, anger, and passion, order is totally the first thing that comes to my mind. Anywho, before the first Great Schism, there were no Jedi and no Sith, just Force users. For a long time it seemed as if everyone was encouraged to go about looking into the Force in their own way. There was some outside influence, and some inner conflict, but all in all, everyone seemed to be okay with Force users sitting together in a great big kumbaya circle. About 2,500 years before the Battle of Yavin, the Star Wars scientists perfected that thing we know of as the hyperdrive. With this amazing bit of space-agey technology, travel went from months or even years to straight-up days. Everyone got closer together and voila! The Galactic Republic was formed. This meant that people who had a connection to the Force started, getting together and talking about the Force. It was also the time in which the Jedi Code started to become a thing. This was a really big thing for one young Jedi by the name of Arden Lynn. She didn't like the way the Jedi were doing things. She thought they were being really exclusionary and that their doctrine didn't suit all Force users. Still, it might have just stopped there if Lynn hadn't met Zendor, who was just as disgruntled as she was. The two of them got together and went and petitioned the Council to leave Ossus and create their own academy elsewhere. Spoiler alert, the Council said no. And they did it anyway. Arden, Lynn, and Zendor hopped on a ship and went all the way to planet Leto, where they started their own thing called the Legions of Leto. This group was the very beginning of what is commonly known as, drumroll please, the Sith. Now, despite being on a different planet, the Sith and the Jedi go to war. It starts on the Jedi-occupied planet of Ossus, and then thanks to the hyperdrive, war went here, here, and even here. But in the end, Zendor dies at the hands of Jedi Master Arwista Pinna, who is known as the Green Blade, despite the fact that he fought with twin katanas? Yeah, I don't know either. This Jedi used the skill of battle meditation to help obliterate the forces of Leto, because completely annihilating a people because of their belief system seemed like the light-sided thing to do at the time, right? It was that very action that would lead to the creation of the Sith, so way to go there. The war ended when the Green Blade and Arden Lynn fought and ultimately killed one another. Okay, she didn't die. She entered into a deep trance meditation for a really long time, but still, no more war. Now we're going to jump all the way across the galaxy to a place called Korriban. Here live a race known as the Sith, alternately known as the Red Sith, or Sith purebloods. Yeah, that doesn't sound racist at all, right? These people were a viciously proud warrior race with a higher than average number of potential Force users among them. Their way of life was all about the strongest take the power. And if you're looking for the strongest of the strong, you're looking for Ardus. Overlord Ardus was a master Force magician who was bigger and stronger than any of his people. He used magic to extend his lifespan and ruled for over 300 years. The Murakata Infinite Empire showed up on Korriban. They, for some reason, taught him how to use holocrons, and he poured his cumulative magical knowledge into it, creating the very first Sith holocron. Idus died shortly thereafter because the Rakata are big jerks, and he tossed the entire world into chaos. Enter the Jedi Exiles. Alright, so while Idus was driving off an entire empire, the Force users were going through 100 years' war. This war started when a group of Force users discovered that by manipulating certain aspects of the Force, they could change life itself. Ajunta Pall said the following: "So envious were the Jedi Knights of our ability to transform creatures into improved manifestations, they made their ongoing duty to hunt us, the Dark Jedi, wherever we attempted to experiment and practice our knowledge." I will cover this whole war in another episode, but for now what is important is that Dark Force users were exiled from Tython and found a home on Korriban, and it is here that dark-sided users met the Sith. It is believed that the Exiles, with their strange powers and combative abilities, were welcomed as leaders, or possibly even gods. I'm not Sith. I do share their blood. Yet, in the time since we arrived amongst these savage people, we have become their rulers. According to Exile Holocron 3rd month. Together, the Jedi Exiles and the Shadow Hand overthrew the Sithari, and Ajunta Pall became the very first Lord of the Sith. So, if Sith were originally meant a race, and the Exiles were just known as the Exiles, why do we now refer to any dark-sided user as the Sith? Well, let me put it like this. Exiles were best known for their ability to manipulate life, and the Sith species liked to choose its mates from the best and strongest. So, this plus this equals. So, this guy was Marka Ragnos, or at least it is his well-known mask, and he ushered in a barely documented era of Sith history that they refer to as the Golden Age of Sith. It supposedly encompassed 120 planets, and yet somehow managed to fly under the radar for the rest of the galaxy. When Ragnos dies, no one could decide who was supposed to succeed him. The two main contenders were Naga Sato and Ludo Kresh, who would eventually get into a huge fight at Ragnos' funeral. That's rude. This was further interrupted by some poor explorers from the Galactic Republic who were immediately taken into custody, and that began a huge war which would lead to the Sith and the Jedi fighting, which would then lead to the fall of the Sith Empire. However, the Sith were not obliterated, just really dispersed. Some Sith went to Thule, some went to Umbria, and an entire ship crashed on Kesh. And still more. Enter Jedi Freedon Nad. Yeah, Nad. I thought it was a weird name too. He was also Anakin Skywalker, the beta version. By that I mean that both Anakin and Nad were told that they were special, that they had a prodigal connection to the Force, and this ultimately resulted in a bit of arrogance. Guess how that turned out? Nad eventually found that very first Sith holocron that I talked about and got an A+ in Sith. He eventually stumbled across a Sith Lord taking a 500-year dark side nap on Yavin. With all this training and knowledge, he ushered in a new Sith regime called the Onderonian Legacy. It continued after his death since he managed to help seduce a queen with his spirit. What a player. When his spirit eventually faded, however, the Great Sith War happened. While this war isn't as impressive on its own, it was led by an uppity Sith or former Jedi known as Exar Kun. However, Exar Kun's actions started the Krath Holy Crusade. And while that whole ordeal is way too complicated for this short video, I will say that it all eventually led to the Mandalorians getting really pissed off and wanting revenge. You know, because Mandalorians are kind of petty that way. Just ask my favorite Mandalorian. Wait, that's a terrible picture. Oh my god, Candrace, why is there no fan art of you? Close enough. Anyway, the next big Sith to pop up was Revan, and if you want to know anything about him, or in my case her, then I highly recommend playing the Knights of the Old Republic. Or, you know, listening to our first video. All of this ends with the first Jedi Purge, and eventually, and I do mean eventually, the return of Naga Sato, and the Sith attacking Coruscant, and the following Cold War, the 11-year-long Cold War. And following those wars that beat down both the Jedi and the Sith, which is covered in my previous video and thus will not be covered here, what really matters now is the year 1003 BBY, and the moment that a young miner from a Protoss named Dessel killed an ensign from the Grand Galactic Republic. Fearing for his life, he left his planet and found sanctuary in the Sith Brotherhood of Darkness, and took the name of Bane. That's Darth Bane to you. Eventually, he and his apprentice Xana, with whom he shared some makeup tips, would create and uphold the rule of two that kept the Sith Order alive, though not necessarily well, into the modern era. And that's all we have time for today. Thank you for listening, and if you want to see more videos like these, remember to like and subscribe.